I consider myself a part of the climate movement, I would like to say. I think there is a certain disconnect that's going on, and it's, what's happening to our planet is a kind of like a slow thing, and it's hard for people to grasp when it's not right in front of their face. Of course, like us as New Yorkers, we had Sandy happen, and it's when something like that happens and it's right in front of your face and it's on your doorstep, it really wakes you up. But when it's not happening every day, or when it's happening really far away, like the poles, I think we have a really hard time connecting with it and making any kind of changes, even if they're small, in our own lives, to try to help the crisis. So the point of my work is to try to offer people a time and a place and a space to connect with these landscapes that are changing so drastically and causing such mass destruction on our planet.
You're going there and you're experiencing it, and then you're coming back and effectively telling people about it visually. Is that a good description of what you do? But you're not trying to be a documentarian.
Absolutely.
In any sense.
I do call it documentation, but of course it's in an artistic sense. So yeah, take that for however it is.
You're going, observing, and reporting.
Yeah, I think that is how I see it. And the place where documentation comes into play, I think, is I'm drawing these structures, especially, icebergs and glaciers, actually, it's both, really. I'm sort of freezing them in time in my drawings because it won't look the way that it looks when I saw it. It's not going to look like that even the next day. I mean, there were places in Antarctica where I got to revisit a week later and the entire bay looked completely different. I wouldn't have recognized it if I didn't know, the mountain range, if that weren't visible. So, they're changing every day. The glaciers are calving, icebergs are flipping, breaking, melting, cracking. So there is a sense of documentation, I think, in that, where I'm holding a moment in time and stretching it out, expanding it to exist, hopefully, for several years.
It is an interpretation, though, and I guess any visual image, be it with the hand or with the camera, is obviously an interpretation. But your mother was a more, what we would call, traditional documentarian. She was going and taking photographs of these things. Why didn't you just settle on that? Why weren't photographs enough? Why did you have to take the photographs and then paint from them?
For me, pastel is my medium. I don't think, you might guess that I was trying to move away from what my mom was doing, but it really wasn't about that. I mean, photography is very much a part of my work. I work to capture as much as I can while I'm on site, and then I work from the photos when I get home. It's different, and I don't want to say that the drawings are better than the photos, because they're not. It's just a different way of interpreting them, and I think there is an element of time that is sort of captured in this second, and then it's stretched out over this long period of time that it takes me to actually make the drawing, and then, sort of freezing time in the long sense. I would just say that pastel is my medium, and that's the way that I find I can best deliver this information.
What's the push and pull for you between being visually, quote unquote, accurate, as in what a photograph would be, or a replication of a photograph, versus you trying to interpret or make a statement with the painting?
I think the latter is most important to me. However, it is also very important to be sort of true and as honest as I can with what I've witnessed. So as opposed to copying the photograph, it's more about bringing the experience that I had while I was there, witnessing the landscape, and to try to bring that into the drawing. So I use the photographs as kind of reference, because I can't remember all those little details in my mind. That would just be impossible. Some people can, I guess, if you have a photographic memory, but I don't. So I use the photographs in that sense, but then I do sometimes change, the shape of the ice a little bit, or maybe the water was really choppy and dark that day and I want a nice reflection, and so I'll make that up. But in general, I try to stay as true as I can to how I remembered the landscape being in that moment in time when I saw it.
I have to say, you're rather chipper. You don't seem like somebody who's very depressed about this, and that's terrific, but there are a lot of people who are very, very long-faced about all of this climate change. You're kind of bringing the message with a smile rather than with a frown, or am I misreading? No,
I'm really glad that that's how you perceive it, because that is what I'm trying to do. I think, some people need to see destruction to to take action. They need to be shocked in order to recognize what's going on and be motivated to act. I'd rather be motivated by positivity. It's just the way that I was brought up. It's the way I think I am naturally. I'd rather focus on how we can move forward as opposed to the crap that we've already done. And we can. Some scientists say it is too late, and it is too late for some things. We have reached a point of no return, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot we can do to turn the ship around and to make things better in the future. There's a way that we can save us as a human race, and there's a way that we can just be kinder to our planet. I mean, we have the technology, so it's just a matter of, I think, being inspired to make that change and make that shift.
Well, okay. Well, tell me, who's the audience then, or what reaction do you want from people who interact with your work?
Everyone is the audience, ideally, as many people as possible. History shows that art can make huge impacts. I just actually learned recently this really interesting little fact that another artist who's doing similar work that I am had found, and there was some movie about a whale in the 50s, or it was a Disney movie. What's a big Disney movie about a whale? Basically, it changed the human perspective of what whales were. We used to think they were these monsters because they're these gigantic creatures that we don't really know that much about, and we were just killing them and killing them and killing them. And then this Disney movie came out that just, maybe it was even a cartoon, I don't know, but it elevated the whale and it made them look cute, and now we all love whales and we want to protect them, and we've come a really long way in that regard. Of course, the whale population is still far from what it should be, but it's getting better. Psychology tells us that we as human beings take action and make decisions based on our emotions more than anything else, and I think what art can do is reach our emotions, and that's why I'm drawing the beautiful things that I see. I mean, I love beauty. That's just something that's a personal thing too. I like surrounding myself with beauty. I like to look at beautiful things. Some people might call that superficial, but it's just, I'm a visual person. I'm an artist. That's just the way I am. And so I recognize the beauty, and I want to bring it in front of as many people as I can, so they see it and they fall in love with it the way that I have, and it touches them. I don't think, you can have a different kind of emotional reaction when you see destruction. And I think in a way that's just as important. It's just not the direction, it's not the path I'm taking. I think the implication is enough. And it's one reason why I'm right now focusing a little bit more on the ice than I am on the water, because it's not, the water series that I've been working on it's a little more subtle, which I think is fine too. But you don't, you see a drawing of water and you don't necessarily think climate change, but when you look at ice, you do. Thankfully, at this point, that's what happens. I mean, it didn't 10 years ago.
Can you tell me does that feel a certain way, like a second home, so to speak?
What's interesting is that I prefer the heat over cold weather, and I run cold. But my mom was the opposite. She called herself a polar bear in a past life. She could be out in the ice for hours on end with like frozen eyelashes and not care. She just, the whole family was like waiting and starving, and she's just like, I'm just waiting for the right light with her camera. I don't know, that perseverance really inspired me. But yeah, I mean, when I travel, especially when I revisit places like Greenland, the first time I went was in 2006 with my family, and then I went again in 2012. Taking that trip that was in honor of my mom after she passed away. And she had asked for her ashes to be spread there. And I said, okay, well, if I can't get to Greenland, where else would you want them? And so I ended up spreading half in Greenland because my whole family wasn't with me there, and then saved the other half for the Hudson River, which was her second choice to do with my family, which we spread on her first birthday after she had passed away. So yeah, I mean, there was a huge emotional connection. I felt my mom there, really. Like, I felt her in the landscape before I even put her in the landscape. It was because we'd been there together, and I remembered every day of that trip. And so yeah, I mean, there's a part, I think every time I travel, it connects me to my mom in a certain way, because that's, she was the reason why I traveled growing up my whole life. And to be honest, when she got really sick and it was clear that she wasn't going to make it, I thought that was the end of my traveling days. I didn't think I had it in me to plan and undertake these adventures that she spent so much time preparing for. I feel like that Greenland expedition that I led was maybe the biggest gift she ever gave me, because it was just so clear that I had to carry it out in her honor. It was a trip that she had planned, and we didn't really talk about that yet, but she taught me so much, of course. I mean, I grew up traveling with her and following the light. And so I learned a lot about composition. I mean, my aesthetics are pretty much the same as hers. We had a couple of shows together actually before she passed away, and I'm really glad that we got that opportunity, because to see the work next to each other, it's very clear that I came out of her. You know, we have very similar aesthetics, and I think I just learned that from her from an early age.
Does it ever get put in your face that there are people who still blithely disagree with the biological facts of what you're documenting?
Yes. Most recently in Antarctica. I mean, I try to avoid those conversations when I know people don't believe. Well, that's not true. I try to educate them if I can, but usually people are not so open to learning. But you know, there were a lot of people who had a lot of money and oil on my trip to Antarctica. It's that kind of expedition. You have to, first of all, you have to be able to afford, but and there's a lot of money and oil, of course. But yeah, I mean, I gave a presentation on my expedition, and afterward, I was having dinner with these people that I'd been hanging out with the whole trip, and I had no idea. I didn't know where their politics, you know, were. And one guy at the dinner table said, "So, what about like this whole human impact thing? Like, what about the whole like the natural courses of the earth and how our climate has changed over, you know, hundreds and thousands of decades in the past that, you know, wasn't because of us." And I try to educate myself as best I can so that in these kinds of situations I can come back with the best response. And at this point, I think my best response is, what's the harm in taking precautions? Because there really isn't. It will create jobs. We can be kinder to the earth. It's all good. So there's really no purpose. I mean, of course, unless you are the CEO of Exxon, then it's not good. I mean, if you look at the data and you look at what the projections are, it's far more dangerous to just sit and wait and see what happens. And it's far more expensive to sit and see and wait what happens. And if we prepare for these disasters ahead of time, we will be much more set up, and it's still going to be expensive, but we're going to lose a lot less if we prepare ourselves. So I don't really understand why we shouldn't do anything about it. That just doesn't make sense. It's not logical.
The process at the moment involves you going on these very sophisticated trips to the edges of the world. Mm-hmm. Documenting with a camera what happens and then coming back and painting with pastels. Is that always going to be the process, do you think? Do you ever see yourself standing in front of a large canvas in a very cold place? I'm imagining with your affinity for the heat, that's unlikely. In
past trips, I have done a little bit of that, but I find that the little sketches I make on when I'm on these expeditions, they don't really inform the larger work. It's more just for fun while I'm there. And I realize my time is better spent collecting images with my camera. Do I ever see my process changing? I can't predict the future, so it's really hard to tell. But in terms of the materials, I love pastel. I love the subject that I'm working with. I feel really passionate about it, and so I don't know what the future holds, but I still have a lot to learn about ice and the ways in which it can be captured and the ways in which it can be conveyed. And I think until that resource, has dried up, I don't think I'll stop being inspired by it.
No danger of you throwing your hands in the air when the science finally comes back and says, drive your SUVs, it's too late.
No, because if it's done, I don't think there is ever like it's done. I don't think that's an option, because you can look way into the future and say like, well, it's really about the human race surviving, not the planet, because I don't think we can. We have caused drastic impact, but what's going to end up happening in the end is not Earth combusting, I don't think. I think it's the human race not being able to survive anymore with the resources that we've depleted. I really think we're trying to save ourselves here in the end. Maybe I should focus more on that than the beauty of the landscapes that we're losing. But I don't think there's any point in which we can throw up our hands. I mean, we've come so far and we've caused so much damage already, but we can move forward and we can change those patterns. Again, like, I don't see any downside to being kind to this planet that is keeping us alive.
Do you ever think about the fact that you are describing a very fragile material location using very fragile media?
It's all water in a different form, whether it be fog, cloud, ice, snow, water, ocean, lake, all those different forms of water, but I'm using very dry material, soft and dry material to create this imagery. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it other than it's just been my medium of choice since I was young. Actually, I've just always felt an affinity towards charcoal, and then that led me into color, pastel, which is basically the same material but just color. I just love it. I don't know. I mean, I tried oil painting at one point and just wanted to go straight back to the pastel. I'd like to think that at some point I will be more interested in venturing into different materials, but for now, pastel is my jam.
And the process of it, because it's not just creating the image and the color, it's constantly glazing and drawing and glazing. I mean, there's a lot of process.
There's a lot of layering and reworking, yes. And I think each drawing is a different process for me. I learn something different, and part of that is because I try to choose my imagery based off, like, oh, I haven't tried this texture yet. Let me see how that'll look. Or let me see what I can learn from this. So I learn something with every piece, and I've learned new techniques with every piece, and it's all just playing around, really, and discovering new things, which is really fun.
Tell me about the circumstances under which your early education took place. You were in a very small school.
Absolutely. I think that my upbringing, as well as my education, fostered something that was already in me. I think I inherited the love of art from my mom, and I grew up with art supplies always around the house, and when we traveled, we brought art supplies with us, and we made paintings and drawings of what the landscape that we were seeing, which were always remote landscapes because that's what my mom was interested in. The education I had absolutely fostered that. I went to a really small, progressive private school from kindergarten through 6th grade, and then went to the Waldorf school from 6th grade through high school. And both schools really, but maybe especially the Waldorf school, had art infused in every single subject. And for some people, that was not so fun, who weren't, people who weren't artistically inclined. But for someone like me, it was perfect.
And it was never your intention to become an artist, right? Or you never thought it was possible?
It's not that I didn't think it was possible. I just didn't know that I loved it enough that I wanted to make a career out of it. I loved theater. We put on plays at the Waldorf School every year up until high school, and then you do one sophomore year and one senior year. And that was always the most fun for me because the whole class would get together as a community and work on a production together, and everyone pulled it together. Everyone had a different role, whether it be like set design or the lead role or helping people with lines. The school that I went to, they tried to give everyone a chance to try especially in high school, they would specifically take the quietest, most shy person in the class and give them the lead role because they knew they could handle it and it would help them, break out of their shell. So there was that, but then I played the lead female role in our senior play. So it was everything.
So to speak, day jobs, what do you want to call them? Side jobs, all the way through until about a year ago.
I knew I was taking art as my main vocation, choosing that as my main vocation. I took my first art class second semester sophomore year. I just put it off for so long because they were really long classes, and I thought, I love art, but like 3 hours is really intense. I took my first art class, and it was form and design, which was essentially sculpture 101. I'm terrible at sculpture, I still am, but for some reason I still knew. It made me realize to what extent I loved art, because I was horrible at it and I struggled through that class, but I still realized, this is what I need to be doing. I need to switch courses from theater. So I majored in studio art, and pretty much right out of college I was offered to be in my first show. And I still, I loved jewelry designs. At the time I was making jewelry and selling it. And I loved yoga. I had done at the Waldorf School, when you're a senior, you do a senior project, and you can choose whatever you want, basically. And I ended up doing yoga kind of as a roundabout thing. I wanted to do massage therapy, and I went to meet this therapist to be my mentor, and she was a yoga teacher, so I went to her yoga class and ended up loving it. And with my scoliosis, it just was something that people had always recommended, and so it seemed like a great thing for me to do. And from then on, I've always loved it. And I knew art wasn't going to be a guaranteed income, especially right away. And so that's why I pursued, I got my yoga teacher training and started teaching, and that's why I kept making jewelry and selling it. And I did all these three things along with those two things along with the art. Art just kept kind of moving forward more quickly than anything else. Well, or not, I don't know if it was more quickly, but it always, everything just kind of kept working out in that direction for me. I kept getting offered to be in new shows. After my first solo show in New York, I was offered a solo show in New York City really early on at a very young age. And so I just kept pursuing it, and I loved it. So I kept making more and more work. And the more it took off, the less I started focusing on the other things. It really fuels my art, and I feel like my art fuels my yoga. They both kind of go hand in hand. Physically, I need it to stay, I'm sitting for long hours on end or standing for long hours on end while I draw, and I need some movement at the end of the day to work out those kinks that naturally, occur. And also just as a form of meditation, it's drawing is very much meditation for me, but so is yoga, and they both kind of feed off of each other in that way.
Did it all happen as it was supposed to happen? Did you ever feel like you were behind schedule, or I'm tired of doing, I don't want to make jewelry anymore, I want to just paint, and I don't want to have to do this anymore, I just want to be where you are now?
Oh, no, actually. I always loved, I actually miss making jewelry. I just don't have time for it now. So I made a point of following paths that I loved and really enjoyed spending time doing. So I really loved all three, but it's more like now looking back, it makes sense that art should have always been my main focus. I'm glad that it took off the way that it did, and it allowed me to focus on it the way that it did. And I had very supportive parents as well. Of course, they helped me out a little bit in the beginning. When I first moved to the city, they were supplementing a little bit of my rent for the first year, and I definitely was living the starving artist life for a few years, and things have been really great for the last couple, but it's never a guarantee that my next paycheck is coming in. I don't know. I don't think I ever felt like the art world wasn't catching up to me. I felt like I was always on a good, steady path with my career, and things were happening the way I wanted them to. I mean, my mom always taught me to visualize the things that I wanted and just see them happening, and then the universe will provide. And it's really true. It's worked out that way for me my whole life, and so I'm just going to keep believing it.